Hello, you magnificent bastards, and welcome back to a new episode of Slash Rev, where I talk about stuff. I'm, of course, your host, the Revenge, and today I'm gonna talk a little bit about the downfall I feel of the Need for Speed series because I started playing Need for Speed back when Underground One was released, which was in 2003, and I really liked that game. You could do a lot of customization, so your cars really felt like yours and not just something you were driving. Although that was really what you were doing, of course, but it really felt a little bit like yours. You could do a little bit, you could show a little bit of yourself in them, which was very good. And it even had some storytelling, even though it was rushed a little bit, so that it couldn't quite do what they were planning. And that really came to fruition in Underground 2, where it was finally an open world, and that was actually what they were planning with Underground 1. It was a really good game. You could go everywhere you wanted. It was nice to just cruise sometimes when you were just not feeling like racing for a little while. You could just cruise around. Um, and even for your upgrades and your visual stuff, you had to go to different shops, and I even enjoyed going to those just driving there rather than fast traveling. It was a really nice experience, even though there were downsides. I mean, for instance, one thing you had to do to get to a new level in the game, you often had to get your car a certain visual rating, and not every car could get to the end of the game, which was a bit of a shame. I mean, sometimes you like just getting your car that you really enjoyed, getting it all the way up there, but it wasn't always possible. That was quite a shame. But and of course, the last race, if anyone remembers, it was a big old loop. There was a little part in the airport at first where you were really combating this great enemy that you had explored um, throughout the game, where you really felt like he was your big nemesis. So in the car, in the airport, it really felt like you were fighting him, and he was very fast. And then you came out of the airport, and soon you were back on the highway again. And then it turned out he only did 130 or something, I think, was his maximum speed, while you were just powering past him with your car, and he was nowhere to be seen. It was impossible to lose that race, pretty much, which was a shame. But in the end, it was a good game. Um, and even though I didn't like race modes like drag racing and drifting as much, it was still good enough to do. And especially if you looked at how you unlocked the world, that was also very cool, because you started out with this just this basic city with uh, a highway that ran pretty much around the edge of town, and then as you unlocked stuff, you went into the hills and even the mountains, and you unlocked stuff like the more industrial district. It was really cool. But then we went to Most Wanted, which was possibly an even more beautiful map with a very special section. I always feel with that area where it was a perfect circle. I think it was with a little bit of town inside it. There was some quite cool stuff about that map. The only downside was the story and the police introduced. I felt some people really enjoyed the police, but the thing was that I felt it kind of conflicted with the ability to cruise. I really enjoyed in Underground 2, like I said just now, to just drive around and explore the town. And now suddenly, when you were just driving around, you would get the police um, trying to catch you, and you had to evade them all the time, and that wasn't fun. You couldn't just drive to a store. You preferred I preferred fast travel, because that way I wouldn't run into any police cars, and that's not why I enjoyed the game series. So it was already going a little bit downhill from there, I feel. And on top of that, the way the story was put up is that you wanted to beat some guy who was on the top of a most wanted list, and to do that, you had to defeat everyone on the most wanted list that was below him, and they had certain challenges they wanted you to do. And for the most part, that was okay, because it was mostly races. However, there was also pretty much always a police aspect to it, and that police aspect really got more and more crazy as you got higher on the list. So you had to do more and more to get to that, to get those challenges, and especially some of those challenges really took like 20 minutes, half an hour to finish the challenge. But then you had to evade the police after that. So sometimes you would get to the threshold of the challenge, and then you had to ditch the police, and then it didn't work, and you just wasted half an hour, and nothing happened, even though races and stuff only took like 10 minutes maybe. So it felt like a waste of time, and it was just not enjoyable, at least not for me. And on top of that, uh, because the way it felt really grindy that way, and there wasn't much story. I mean, you got to learn these characters, these most wanted people, but there was a bit of a lack of story, I feel. And after that came Carbon in 2006, and it felt a little bit like Underground 3. It was nice throwback that way. It was again mostly at night. It was more like illegal street racing again, even though I think Most Wanted was that as well, I guess. But just because of the dark, it felt a little bit more like that street racing feel that you got before, and it was really cool. They introduced Autoscope, which allowed you to even more customize your car. But there was still police around, which of course wasn't the best. And then as well, as you progressed, there was like pretty much three levels, and that also reflected in the cars. There was three levels of cars, um, and you unlocked different areas in those three levels. And there was a little bit of an issue in where you went from level 2 to level 3, and you couldn't buy any level 3 cars, but your opponents suddenly were level 3 opponents. So it was pretty much impossible to win races. You had to, I think in the end, I had to do like one region where I could unlock a car without doing anything with opponents, more like, I don't know, drifting or something maybe. And I managed to do it there, but it was a little bit steep. It felt like running into a wall suddenly. So there was some issues with that game as well. And again, the police, I didn't like that. And after that, I went to Pro Street, and that's where they really kind of it started to feel like they didn't put much effort into it anymore. They ditched open world. They went into a area where they had circuits pre-built. Um, so yeah, the free roam was gone. Even though, of course, the fun out of free roam was already gone a little bit for me since Most Wanted. Now it was completely gone, just impossible to do. And the driving really felt bad. You could either have like driver's aids that try to make it as easy as possible to race, or you could turn them off. And it really felt like either you turn them off and you just feel like you're constantly crashing, or you turn them on and it feels so much like you're on rails that trying to overtake someone was a big ordeal because you were trying to go against the ideal line that the game wanted you to drive on. So it felt really, really bad. On top of that, I feel like I'm not entirely sure whether it was this game or maybe even already in Carbon or Most Wanted. I can't really um, be too sure. But around this time, Need for Speed also did a thing, or EA more likely, where at one point they had patches, and one of these patches sounded like you got free cars, but when you installed it, you had these cars, and you could also only pay for them with real out of game money rather than using in game cash. So suddenly you had all these cars that were like, hey, look, this is a beautiful car you can drive, but you have to pay for it. And even though I don't mind DLC too much, it was one of the first encounters I had with DLC, and I would have preferred if the DLC was just something you paid for, and then it was in your game rather than it going into your game for free, and then you have to pay for it in the game with, again, not in-game cash. It was really an obnoxious way of doing it. And if you look at all the DLC, like for instance in Paradox games, often the only thing that happens is that you get a little bit of a banner in the start screen where it says, "Hey, there is DLC available if you want it. You can buy it." and that's all that is mentioned of it. And so that feels a lot better, because you get notified that there is DLC, but you don't really see it anywhere in your game. That feels bad. So then they moved on to Undercover, which, to be honest, there isn't much to say about that one. It was a pretty good one. Was a bit of the same level as Most Wanted in Carbon, I feel, even though it had worse reviews. It was just another city, another bunch of cars, the police again. It just wasn't great. And then they came out with Shift, which was again hailed quite positively, but I personally feel like it was a bit of a rehash from Pro Street, if I recall correctly. It felt like a lot of the tracks came back, and it's the same cars again. So basically just playing the same game all over again, and that's not fun. The same thing happened with Need for Speed World, which was an MMO, but they used two cities of previous games that they just reused for this, and it's like when I play a game, I want to have a new experience and not just do the same thing all over again. And that's the same thing that happened a few years later with the Run, which is the last one I played. Played every one of them before that, but the Run was the last one I really played, because at that point I gave up on Need for Speed. The Run was pretty fun. There was a new story mode which made it a lot more fun. However, on the other side of the spectrum, um, the problem was that they used tracks that they developed before and cities. They reused them, so every track you drove, you were just doing again. It wasn't immediately clear, but once I found out, once I was like, hey, I did these sequence of corners before, I suddenly realized that all the tracks were just stuff you already done, and all the fun was out of it. For me, at least, I didn't finish it in the end, and there were some troubles with it as well. The switching between cars didn't feel very intuitive. You often had to drive into a gas station, I think, and then you switched cars. And by the time I figured out that's what you had to do, I often was already past the gas station, and it felt weird. And also, the idea was that you were like 200 or 150 racers or something, and you tried to be first, going from the west coast to the east coast, and it was all divided up in sections with sometimes quick events between them. The idea was good, but then again, in the races, if you set it to a level that you could beat reasonably easy, you often found out that once you got the lead, there was nothing in front of it, and it was just really 10 cars you were facing, and you had to be the front one of those. So once you were out in front, it sometimes felt like you were in no man's land, and how the hell would you catch up with the guys in front? So that was a bit weird. It didn't feel like you were racing 200 guys. It felt you were like racing 10 at a time. So that wasn't very good either. So yeah, I feel that Need for Speed just isn't. It became a little bit like a franchise where they just try to get a new one out every year, much like they do with, I think, stuff like Call of Duty and most sporting games. Um, they just bring one out every year, and it really hurts the quality. They start reusing the same stuff. They don't think things through, and the cool stuff that they had at the beginning, it seems like they realized that that's not a good business model or whatever. They are just trying to sell as much stuff without putting much effort into it, and it's just not fun anymore. And that's a shame. I really would like to see a good Underground 3 where there's no, or at least you can toggle whether there's police around. You can drive around. There was actually a game which was an technically an MMO, which is what is it called again? I forget. Uh, Test Drive Unlimited. What it was, where you were driving in Hawaii, and every car you wanted had their manufacturer had their own shops in town, so you had to drive to a specific dealership to get the car you wanted. And sometimes it was even not available at the time, and you had to order it. And it really felt fun because that way you feel more like you have to do something. You have a reason to drive around rather than just going to the same shop every time. You have to go to different places. You get to explore the town. It's really good. Um, and I hope that one day maybe Need for Speed goes back to that and makes a proper Underground 3. But it doesn't look like it yet. There was some rumors about it. And even then I'm like, well, it would be fun if they made one, but the way they're doing it now, I feel like it would be a bad one. So it's a shame. It's a shame that, because of course in Underground 2 by now is such an old game, and I completely finished it so many times that it's just not fun to play that one anymore, because I know everything about it. It doesn't look as good anymore in nowadays standards. So I would like a new one where everything is a new thing again, but when they do, it's always a disappointment. So it's a real shame that EA murders that money games this way, and this is just another franchise that they spoiled. It's a real shame, and I hope one day I'll find a game that is somewhat like it. But until then, Need for Speed won't get my money anymore. I hope it doesn't get yours anymore either, because it's crap. So yeah, that's something I really felt like I should get off my chest. So I hope you enjoyed listening to me. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, please leave a like and subscribe to my channel, and I hope to see you guys next time. Cheerio. The building looks weird. Ah, yeah, it looks. I was looking at it straight on, and just the perspective kind of threw me off. But it's a bit slanted here.
Oh, hello, Lunith. I'm picking flowers. Where the hell did you come from?